Just about a month ago, I shared with you a video on what is a PhD. I think it really was about my personal experiences of a PhD program and sort of touched about what can you expect both in terms of the hard deliverables and the soft skills required to do a PhD. The comments from colleagues were also very, very interesting. Two of them particularly caught my attention. One was, I think, a very erudite past colleague of mine who pointed out that you don't need a PhD to be a researcher, and that's absolutely true. The spirit of inquiry really doesn't demand to have a PhD degree to do that, and you can very well do it in any field, including technical field, just probably post a master's degree. So I think that's one very valid input that I received. The other one was, what are the real capabilities that you require to be in a PhD? Now, these are both very, very big questions, comments. And I thought what I would do today is kind of take you to another aspect of a PhD, which is why do a PhD? And by converse, why you don't need to do a PhD or why you shouldn't be doing a PhD. So with that, let me start thinking about why would you want to do a PhD or why should you seek a PhD degree? I think the first one comes from a very innate perspective of who you are and are you curious enough to want to pursue the why and how of anything. So largely a PhD program, whether you call it a program or the process of doing a PhD, is really about looking at an observation and beginning to think why and how. And therefore, there's an innate sense of curiosity connected to an in-depth research program like the one you would undergo during a PhD. The other one is with respect to a sense of your own ways of thinking. One, if it's very analytical. I think it's fairly important in a answering of a question of the quality of a PhD degree to be able to put facts in front of you and analyze situations to be able to come to and understand the dependencies and for each dependency to do the same. Therefore, an analytical mind is a very important requirement for a PhD program or for just having a bent of mind to do research and therefore a PhD. The second one, of course, is the passion. I think I did mention before that PhD is a fairly long program, requires probably a commitment of at least a few years of in-depth understanding, research, analysis, or just hard work. And therefore must be driven by passion. The passion to want to do something that involves a large tract of time to be able to uncover something that is, of course, worthwhile, and therefore you have to be passionate for it to feel worthwhile. I think the more fundamental question really in a PhD program or in any research program, as a matter of fact, is that you are actually pushing the boundaries of knowledge. You are starting essentially from what is known in a given field and then try to expand that envelope to kind of push to new boundaries of knowledge. You must also have inherently a sense to build and grow expertise. It's about having a general overview of things, but in a more research program, what you really do is start to build and grow expertise that's while broad, but more importantly, a lot deeper. And the other aspect of a PhD is, do you really like learning? And as a converse, do you really like teaching? And learning and teaching are essential part of that career, of that journey. It's not that you learn during your PhD and teach as a faculty. You actually learn and teach at the same time. You begin to get skills of learning and teaching, and you carry those skills outside even when you become a faculty. So as a faculty member who's probably done a PhD or a researcher, learning and teaching are always hand in hand. And therefore, it's important to expect that when you want to do a PhD or why you decide to do a PhD, you would want to have that ability to both learn and teach. The next aspect then is, why shouldn't you be doing a PhD? And I think that's an equally important aspect. So if you have all the reasons, and I'm sure that it's not an exhaustive list, and there are a lot more, and other colleagues in research and will tell you a lot more reasons on why you should do a PhD. It's also important to note that you shouldn't do a PhD simply out of a desire to acquire a degree. I think, at least in my view, that's fairly important. While a degree can become a consequence of a PhD program, that isn't a driver for a PhD, and it's a more fundamental, innate, sense of what you want to achieve in terms of becoming an expert, pushing boundaries of knowledge, developing an analytical personality, being curious, learning and teaching. Those are really the core elements on why you should choose to do a PhD if you choose to. And the reason I'm saying that is there are many other pursuits to a path that's different from research and can still be very satisfying. So if you are only doing it for a degree, I think there are many other degrees that you can seek, which may not have this quality, which may not have this aspect, but are also lead to very fulfilling careers. So therefore, just a disclaimer to say that the want of having to put a doctor in front of your name or a PhD after your name shouldn't be the motivator for you to pursue that program. Lastly, the aspect of what capabilities do you need? I think it all depends quite a bit, and frankly, many of these capabilities are also something that you can learn in the process of doing a research. But it would help to cultivate a very analytical mindset. I think that's important. I mean, it looks like when we talk about analytical and so on, it's very science and technology oriented, but it really isn't. Even if you are just, let's say, critiquing literature, you will have to have as much of an analytical sense when you're reading something and trying to break it up into parts. So while my experience has mostly been in the area of science and technology, I would say that the analytical capabilities really extend to very many areas of wanting as a capability to have in a PhD program. I think the more important one, and probably where the foundation on which you build, is a very sound understanding of the fundamentals of the subject in which you are pursuing a PhD. A PhD is actually an extension and in it an assumption that you know the area or even the fundamentals of, let's say, an engineering or a science or whatever that subject is. You know that very, very well. You know the tools and techniques. You have a good understanding of the tools and techniques. You have a good understanding of the material on which you are going to be applying those tools and techniques. And therefore, a sound understanding of your subject is probably the most important aspect before you think of doing a PhD or why you should be doing a PhD. Another important aspect is a very cross-disciplinary approach. And I say this because as we look at more and more research problems that we face today in the world and researchers are attacking, it doesn't come in compartments of either a physics or a chemistry or a biology for a science stream. I'm sure similar in other fields too. You need to have a good understanding of multiple disciplines of science, if it's in a science area, and also begin to have an appreciation. So while you might be very strong in a particular subject, also have an equally good appreciation of all other subjects so that you can work from a very cross-disciplinary mindset when it comes to application of your intellect during a PhD program or wherever you choose to work. And therefore, being able to link subject matters that don't seem very linked and being able to bring them together in a thread is possibly a very important requirement in terms of the capability of conducting research. And I think the final one, which comes more from to me from a soft side, especially because I'm a student of the Indian Institute of Science, and I hear challenges with students pursuing a PhD degree that's kind of led to fatal consequences, is your innate strength to be able to live with success and failure, and the ability to live with knowing something, and more importantly, the ability to live with not knowing something. I think the spirit of inquiry is actually coming from the fact there are stuff that you know, but more importantly, there's stuff that you don't know, and you're humble enough to think that, yes, I don't know it today, but I am going to, as a part of a program or as a part of a research, going to move forward to make that unknown known. And that can be pretty frustrating. And therefore, having that strength to say that, well, I've exhausted in a particular time all the knowledge that I have, and I'm not able to answer that problem, having that comfort to say, look, it's a little bit untractable. Let me look at it by multiple approaches. And finally, collaboration, which I talked about in the last one. I think those are really important things to have as soft capabilities when choosing to do a PhD. I hope that answers some of those questions in the series of thoughts that I had to share with you today. And also, I realized that there might be a lot more questions around a PhD program, around research as a career, which I hope at another time I will answer. So today, I hope is clear in terms of an articulation of why should you be seeking to do a PhD, and vice versa. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to your comments in the comment section.